A political earthquake has shattered the halls of power in Pretoria. The revolutionary facade has finally cracked. Official results from the May 2024 national elections confirm a devastating collapse. Support for Julius Malema's economic freedom fighters has plunged to a historic low of 8.52%. As electoral dominance vanishes, over 21,000 impoverished citizens across Limpopo remain betrayed, suffering the catastrophic aftermath of the R2 billion Rand VBS Mutual Bank scandal. Facing political extinction, Julius Malema held an unhinged national press conference. Yet behind the podium there was no vision, no strategy, and no remorse. Instead, a desperate barrage of attacks targeted former allies, independent podcasters, and judicial investigators. This is not reform. This is not rhetoric. Accountability has arrived. As the radical vanguard unravels in real time, a profound question demands an answer. If power changes hands but not structure, has anything really changed? Do not look away. What comes next may change how we read the map of African politics. If you believe in unvarnished truth, give us your like, leave your thoughts, and subscribe to continue this crucial journey together. When the microphones were aligned at the Economic Freedom Fighters headquarters in Johannesburg, the atmosphere was charged not with revolutionary triumph, but with palpable anxiety. For over 13 years, Julius Malema had projected an image of absolute political inevitability. Donning red berets and quoting anti-colonial icons from Thomas Sankara to Patrice Lumumba, the organization presented itself as the sole uncompromising champion of the landless, the working class, and the dispossessed. Yet beneath the fierce rhetoric lay a stark, unyielding truth that no press briefing could obscure. In 13 years of political existence, despite endless promises of radical economic transformation, the party has failed to win a single municipality outright. It has never governed a city on its own electoral mandate. Instead, it relied on fragile opportunistic coalitions in metropolitan hubs like Johannesburg and Ekurhuleni, trading municipal votes for temporary executive seats while basic service delivery to ordinary citizens ground to a complete halt. The national elections of May 2024 delivered an existential reckoning. The voters of South Africa rendered a swift, historic verdict, reducing the party's national support to 8.52%. For the first time since its founding in 2013, the party was decisively pushed out of the top 3 political forces in the National Assembly, eclipsed by the meteoric rise of former President Jacob Zuma's Umkhonto weSizwe party. The loss was not merely numerical. It was a devastating moral rejection of a political movement that consistently prioritized theatrical defiance and personal enrichment over institutional substance and legislative integrity. At the very center of this moral collapse sits the catastrophic scandal of VBS Mutual Bank. Over R2 billion Rand was systematically looted from an institution explicitly designed to safeguard the modest savings of rural pensioners, community burial societies, and impoverished workers across Limpopo and Gauteng. Official forensic investigations and investigative journalism repeatedly linked figures within the highest echelons of the party's leadership to illicit financial benefits drawn directly from the bank's stolen capital. Over 21,000 vulnerable rural citizens watched their life savings vanish overnight, while self-proclaimed champions of the poor allegedly enjoyed luxury fashion private events and opulent lifestyles financed by the plunder of the disenfranchised. This relentless exposure pulled away the mask. What was once presented to the world as an unshakable revolutionary vanguard was laid bare as an increasingly fragile political entity struggling for its political survival. The national press conference convened by Julius Malema was anticipated by political analysts as a moment for strategic post-mortem, a rare opportunity for sober self-reflection, ideological reassessment, and genuine policy reform. Instead, the nation witnessed an extraordinary display of defensive panic and unbridled anger. Rather than accepting accountability for municipal failures or offering solace to the victims of financial plunder, the leadership redirected its fury outward. The political discourse was stripped of substance. It devolved into personal insults, theatrical posturing, and bitter recriminations against the press, the judiciary, and the electorate itself. The spectacle revealed a party hierarchy in profound crisis, entirely incapable of bridging the immense gulf between its grand revolutionary promises and its bleak reality at the ballot box. Yet those who believed this outrage would be directed solely at external rivals were fundamentally mistaken. The most scathing attacks of the entire press conference were reserved for those within the movement's own orbit, starting with the man historically recognized as the strategic brain of the entire political project. The rift that shattered the economic freedom fighters was not born of ideological debate, but of an existential struggle for political survival. For over a decade, Floyd Shivambu stood at Julius Malema's side as the party's deputy president and chief policy strategist. To political observers across southern Africa, Shivambu represented the intellectual anchor of the movement, the quiet architect who drafted manifestos, while Malema provided the fiery rhetoric. When Shivambu abruptly defected to Jacob Zuma's Umkhonto we Sizwe party, taking key administrative cadres with him, the illusion of an invincible vanguard crumbled. Malema's reaction during his national address was a masterclass in political desperation. Gone was the Revolutionary Brotherhood. In its place was a barrage of crude personal attacks. Malema mockingly dismissed his former deputy, reducing years of strategic partnership to vulgar insults, scoffing at the notion that Shivambu was ever the intellectual brain of the organization. This public meltdown exposed a glaring, indefensible double standard at the heart of Malema's political identity. For years, the EFF leader has weaponized personal insults, body shaming, and aggressive rhetoric against his rivals, dismissing all criticism as protected political speech. Yet whenever opposing politicians or investigative journalists probe his personal finances, his luxury lifestyle, or his legal troubles, Malema instantly rushes to the high courts, threatening defamation lawsuits and claiming racial persecution. This breathtaking hypocrisy reveals a politician who demands total immunity to slander others while remaining fundamentally incapable of enduring the slightest public accountability. Before we reveal the next chapter, which is perhaps the most powerful assertion of sovereignty you will ever hear, I want to pause and speak directly to you. If this channel has moved you, if these stories are touching something deep in your spirit, then consider becoming a member. Not for exclusive content or perks, but because supporting this channel is directly supporting narratives that mainstream media refuses to tell. Every membership is a vote for South African Dynamics' mission. Every member becomes a co-creator of the revolution we are documenting. Join us. Stand with the principle that African wealth belongs to Africa. Having turned his fury on his former deputy, Malema expanded his political assault to a new and unexpected target, the independent digital media space. For years, social media commentators, youth-led podcasts, and digital influencers had amplified the party's populist message. But as the party's electoral fortunes waned, these very platforms began asking searching questions. When popular podcasters like Mac G on Podcast and Chill and independent voices like Penuel began scrutinizing the EFF manifesto, particularly its controversial stance on unrestricted regional migration, the party leadership panicked. Unable to offer coherent ideological arguments to a digitally literate youth, Malema lashed out at the podcasters themselves. He publicly vilified independent content creators, accusing them of depoliticizing the youth and labeling popular commentary shows as hostile political entities. He chastised his own party influencers for engaging with critics demanding blind obedience rather than open intellectual debate. This aggressive campaign to censor independent voices betrayed a profound insecurity. The populist messiah could no longer control the narrative in an age of open digital dialogue. Yet these bitter media squabbles and theatrical purges were merely a distracting sideshow. The true existential threat to Julius Malema's political career was quietly gathering irresistible force within the solemn chambers of judicial inquiry. Beyond the digital sphere, a far more formidable threat to Julius Malema's political survival looms within South Africa's judicial framework. During the volatile Malema press conference, the economic freedom fighters leader directed preemptive hostility toward the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry. Anticipating potential summons regarding alleged ties to high-ranking police officials and broader institutional corruption, Malema attempted to dictate terms to the bench. He vehemently declared that no judge, magistrate, or commissioner would address him like a child. This aggressive posturing was not mere bravado, it was a calculated tactical maneuver. By framing routine legal accountability as personal belittlement, Malema actively laid the groundwork for a narrative of victimhood, conditioning his supporter base to view any imminent judicial scrutiny not as an impartial search for truth, but as a politically motivated persecution. This defensive strategy is a familiar pattern in Malema's turbulent legal history. The public remembers his 8-year judicial saga following the discharge of a firearm inside a crowded stadium in East London. When the court ultimately convicted him under the Firearms Control Act, his political apparatus refused to acknowledge the statutory violation. Instead, the narrative was systematically reframed. The prosecution was portrayed as an anti-black conspiracy orchestrated by right-wing lobby groups like AfriForum. Here lies the fundamental collision between justice versus power. In a constitutional democracy, the rule of law requires every public figure, regardless of revolutionary credentials, to answer to the same statutory standards. Yet populist leaders repeatedly attempt to elevate political authority above judicial enforcement, treating legal processes as negotiable battles rather than binding civic obligations. Take a second right here to tell us where you are watching from. Type the name of your city, your land, the soil beneath your feet. And as you do know, this South African dynamic sends you not just thanks, but a blessing for strength in your hands, for pride in your heart, for light on the road ahead. The comments below become a map of connection, showing that this message reaches far beyond borders. The civil consequences of this populist playbook extend deeply into the fabric of South African society. When political elites weaponize racial grievances to shield themselves from criminal liability, public trust in democratic institutions erodes rapidly. Ordinary citizens burdened by high unemployment, crumbling infrastructure, and pervasive crime are asked to rally behind leaders who demand total immunity while delivering no tangible socio-economic progress. Borrowing tactics directly from former President Jacob Zuma's contempt of court battles, Malema relies on polarizing rhetoric to obscure concrete evidence. By demanding that his supporters focus on the identity of his accusers rather than the substance of the allegations, whether involving financial impropriety or stadium firearms, the party leadership degrades the very foundation of constitutional governance. This raises an imperative question for every observer of African democracy. Can a nation maintain constitutional integrity when political leaders weaponize popular grievance to escape statutory accountability, as South Africa's internal political order fractures under the weight of these legal confrontations? The ramifications are no longer confined within national borders. Across the globe, foreign observers, diplomatic missions, and international trade partners are watching Pretoria with heightened vigilance. In the diplomatic quarters of Washington, London, and Brussels, as well as the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa, South Africa's unprecedented political realignment is being subjected to intense geopolitical scrutiny. The May 2024 national elections marked a definitive end to 3 decades of single-party dominance by the African National Congress, forcing the creation of a centrist government of national unity. To international trade partners and global capital markets, the explicit exclusion of radical populist movements from executive governance was initially received with cautious optimism. For foreign investors, the prospect of an unconstrained radical agenda involving uncompensated land expropriation and the nationalization of key economic sectors presented an unacceptable risk to sovereign credit ratings and foreign direct investment across sub-Saharan Africa. However, Western diplomatic missions and regional intelligence analysts quickly recognized that the fragmentation of the radical left has created a volatile, unpredictable threat to regional stability. The high-profile realignment of key political cadres, most notably the transition of Floyd Shivambu EFF strategic architects into Jacob Zuma's Umkhonto we Sizwe party, signaled the emergence of a far more potent opposition bloc. Rather than neutralizing radical populism, the isolation of these forces outside the formal coalition has incentivized an aggressive anti-establishment alliance determined to challenge the legitimacy of Pretoria's governing coalition on both legislative and judicial fronts. From a United States foreign policy perspective, South Africa remains a pivotal economic partner and an essential anchor for regional security. Yet diplomatic relations between Washington and Pretoria remain periodically strained over divergent stances on global governance, multilateral alliances, and strategic non-alignment within the Global South. American policymakers and foreign affairs analysts recognize that if economic stagnation, persistent unemployment, and municipal service failures continue to plague South Africa, the populist narrative championed by discarded political leaders will find fertile ground among a frustrated populace. The international community understands that South Africa's constitutional order faces a critical stress test whether a centrist coalition can deliver tangible socio-economic results before radical populism reclaims the political initiative. Yet, while foreign chancelleries calculate geopolitical risks from afar, the ultimate battle for South Africa's constitutional destiny will not be decided in international diplomatic corridors, but on the dust-choked streets of its own forgotten townships. As South Africa navigates this unprecedented political realignment, the road ahead presents both grave systemic risks and a vital opportunity for democratic renewal. The upcoming local government elections represent an existential battlefield for the economic freedom fighters. In traditional political strongholds across rural Limpopo and Gauteng, the party faces fierce competition, not merely from the ruling coalition, but from rival radical movements. The strategic deployment of culturally influential figures, such as veteran musician and former councillor Papa Penny, leading municipal campaigns in the Greater Giyani district alongside former allies, now aligned with the Maye-Buye movement, exposes a profound electoral vulnerability. If rival opposition factions manage to secure executive mayoral authority in municipal districts before the EFF ever governs a single municipality outright, the party's foundational narrative of administrative competence will completely collapse. Yet this ideological fragmentation offers a historic moment for the democratic maturity of the sovereign nation. For over a decade, vulnerable communities were persistently told that true economic liberation required surrendering constitutional safeguards to charismatic strongmen who governed through personal loyalty rather than institutional accountability. Today, a new civic consciousness is quietly taking root across rural villages and urban townships alike. South Africans are increasingly rejecting theatrical populist slogans in favor of accountable local governance, transparent municipal budgeting, and genuine economic delivery. The era of unpunished political drama and theatrical deflection is drawing to a close. As the judiciary asserts its constitutional independence and voters demand institutional integrity, the nation is discovering that true liberation lies not in revolutionary posture, but in the unwavering application of statutory authority. This is not law. This is not justice. This is enforcement. The long shadow cast by decades of populist manipulation is finally receding before the rising tide of democratic maturity and civic dignity. This fundamental awakening across the electorate marks not the conclusion of South Africa's democratic journey, but the true beginning of its constitutional maturity. Yet as the curtain falls on an era of unbridled rhetoric, one final unyielding question remains to define the ultimate destiny of the Republic. The explosive spectacle witnessed at the recent Julius Malema presser was far more than an outburst of political anger. It was the unmistakable echo of a populist movement confronting its own institutional limits. From the public fallout over the departure of former allies like Floyd Shivambu, EFF strategists, to aggressive attacks on independent podcasters and judicial commissions, the party hierarchy has resorted to deflection rather than accountability. The structural decay of radical populism can no longer be hidden behind fiery speeches or theatrical press briefings. As South Africa's constitutional democracy matures, the electorate is sending a clear, decisive message: political legitimacy must be earned through transparent governance, economic delivery, and absolute respect for the rule of law. This unfolding chapter in Pretoria serves as a poignant universal lesson for democratic societies across the globe. When leaders substitute revolutionary posturing for civic responsibility, the foundational pillars of sovereign governance begin to buckle under the weight of unfulfilled promises. Yet, in the resilience of South Africa's independent judiciary and the growing discernment of its voters, there is undeniable cause for profound hope and national pride. The Republic is demonstrating that its constitutional safeguards are durable enough to withstand the political storms of our era. As the nation stands at this historic crossroads, we are left with a fundamental question that will shape the future of African self-determination. If a nation has the vote, but not the voice, is it truly a democracy? Before we close, let us pause. What you have just heard is not simply an episode of history. It is a reminder that sovereignty, dignity, and hope are still alive, waiting to be claimed. If this message has moved you, then subscribe to this channel. Not because we ask for numbers, but because we are building a space where voices of independence are honored and where stories of pride continue to be told. By subscribing, you are not just supporting us, you are choosing to walk with us into the next chapter of Africa's unfolding story. The journey toward genuine democratic accountability continues, and as the nation moves forward, the ultimate significance of the Julius Malema presser will be judged not by the noise of the podium, but by the enduring strength of South Africa's constitutional order. Thank you for walking this road with South African Dynamics.